In 1985, British high streets were thriving, packed with shoppers and anchored by stores older than the Queen. But in just 20 years, 12 giants like Woolworths and BHS vanished, leaving boarded-up fronts and economic wastelands behind. Was this simply progress, or the result of hidden policy traps and ruthless property economics? What really turned retail's golden age into a cautionary tale? And could it have been stopped? After the Second World War, British towns pulsed with new life. High streets became the beating heart of daily life, not just for shopping, but for community itself. Rows of brick and glass shopfronts lined bustling pavements, anchored by department stores like Woolworths, British Home Stores, and Debenhams. These were not just places to buy goods, they were landmarks where families met, friends lingered, and generations found work. Town centre planning rules kept the focus local, shielding high streets from out-of-town competition, and encouraging a dense, walkable mix of shops, cafes, and services. For many, a job on the high street was a first step into the world of work. By the late 20th century, retail counted among Britain's largest employers, with hundreds of thousands of jobs woven into the fabric of these streets. Saturday afternoons meant crowds queuing at the counter, parents chatting over prams, and workers heading home with pay packets in hand. The high street was more than a marketplace. It was the social engine of a modern, optimistic Britain. Behind the window displays and neon signs, these streets held together the rhythms of community life, promising stability and belonging in a rapidly changing world. A quiet revolution began in the late 20th century, hidden in the fine print of leases and the planning files of local councils. From the late 1980s, new retail parks and superstores appeared at the edges of towns, their vast car parks and warehouse-style units drawing shoppers away from the traditional high street. These out-of-town developments were made possible by changes in planning policy, as government loosened restrictions that once protected town centres. With car ownership rising, families flocked to these new destinations, lured by convenience and free parking. Behind the scenes, the commercial property market was being reshaped by institutional investors, insurance companies, pension funds, and property companies who saw retail premises not just as places to sell goods, but as financial assets designed to deliver predictable, inflation-proof returns. The standard lease became a 20 or 25-year contract with a crucial clause, the upward-only rent review. Every 5 years, rents could be increased to match the market, but never reduced, even if local trade collapsed. Landlords focused on maintaining asset values and steady income streams had little incentive to negotiate when tenants struggled. For retailers, this meant being locked into rising costs, unable to adjust when footfall declined or competition intensified. As a result, what had once been a flexible market hardened into a system where costs could only move in one direction. High streets, already facing new rivals on the outskirts, now found their fate tied to legal devices and investment models that made adaptation nearly impossible. The stage was set for a wave of failures, not from lack of customers alone, but from structures that left no room to breathe when conditions changed. In the autumn of 2008, Woolworths' boardroom became a war room. The chief executive officer, Steve Johnson, brought in as a retail troubleshooter, faced a crisis that moved faster than any turnaround plan. The bank's once steady partners were now shutting doors. Credit lines dried up almost overnight as lenders across the country scrambled to protect themselves from the global financial storm. Johnson's team worked the phones, pitching rescue deals and searching for buyers. But with every hour, options narrowed. Suppliers wanted cash up front, landlords refused to budge on rents, and the company's debts left no margin for error. On November 26th, with no lifeline left, Woolworths filed for administration. Over 800 stores closed within weeks. Nearly 30,000 staff lost their jobs. The collapse sent shockwaves through towns that had counted on Woolworths as an anchor for generations. A different kind of extraction was playing out at British Home Stores. In 2000, Sir Philip Green took control, and within 4 years, he and his family had withdrawn over £1 billion from British Home Stores and its sister companies, paid out in dividends, rent, and interest. The money flowed out even as the company's pension deficit quietly swelled, and investment in stores lagged behind rivals. By the time British Home Stores was sold for £1 in 2015, the pension shortfall had reached £571 million. A year later, British home stores collapsed, closing 164 stores and cutting 11,000 jobs. Parliamentary committees would later call this the unacceptable face of capitalism, a business hollowed out from within, its obligations to workers and pensioners left unmet. Both Woolworths and British home stores were undone not by empty aisles, but by the relentless logic of finance. One felled by a sudden credit freeze, the other by years of systematic extraction, each exposed by a cost base they could not escape. Debenhams, with roots stretching back to the 18th century, became a cautionary tale of how long-term lease contracts can outlast the business itself. By 2019, the company was burdened with dozens of stores locked into upward-only rent agreements, leases signed in the heyday of British retail, now completely misaligned with the reality of falling footfall and online competition. The only escape was a company voluntary arrangement known as a CVA. It was a legal manoeuvre that let Debenhams slash rents on selected sites, switch some to turnover-based payments, and name over 50 stores for closure. Landlords faced with the threat of total liquidation reluctantly accepted deep cuts. More than 90% of creditors, including a majority of landlords by value, voted in favour. Yet even this reset could not outrun the numbers. With fixed costs still high, and the pandemic closing doors across the country, Debenhams entered administration again in 2020. The final blow came in early 2021, when administrators announced all 118 remaining department stores would shut for good. The brand, however, did not disappear. Boohoo, an online fashion group, paid £55 million for the Debenhams name, website, and customer data, leaving behind the leases, the shops, and the workforce. Overnight, a chain that had anchored British towns for over 2 centuries existed only as a digital storefront. The profitable part, the brand, carried on in the cloud, while the high street was left with another empty shell. Over 17,000 chain store outlets have vanished from Britain's high streets, shopping centres, and retail parks since 2015. That is thousands of shutters pulled down every year, leaving gaps where familiar names once stood. Online shopping now claims more than a quarter of all UK retail spending, a leap from less than 5% at the turn of the millennium. The shift is not just about convenience, it is about scale. Warehouses and delivery hubs, built for efficiency on the edge of towns, face a lighter tax burden than the shops they help replace. Business rates in the UK are among the highest anywhere in the developed world, with high street retailers paying more tax per square metre than most of their international peers, and often far more than online fulfilment centres. The numbers reveal a slow-motion collapse, empty units multiplying, footfall draining away, and the tax system pressing hardest on the businesses least able to adapt. Each statistic is a measure of loss, not just for retailers, but for the streets and communities left behind. Urban economists point to a web of policy decisions and financial incentives that, in their view, set the high street up to fail. They argue that planning rules allowed out-of-town retail parks to drain footfall from town centres, while business rates and upward-only rent reviews locked physical shops into rising costs that online or warehouse-based rivals could avoid. For them, the collapse of iconic chains was not simply a matter of changing tastes, but the result of a system that prioritised property values and tax stability over retail survival. On the other side, free market commentators insist the story is one of inevitable progress. They see consumers voting with their wallets, choosing convenience, price, and speed over tradition. From this perspective, high street chains fell because they failed to adapt, slow to build strong online platforms, clinging to outdated formats, and unable to compete with the range and efficiency of digital giants. For them, the high street's decline was not engineered, but earned through missed opportunities and stubbornness. The question lingers: was the British high street brought down by policy and property economics, or by the unstoppable force of consumer choice? Both sides claim the evidence. The answer remains unsettled. Today, high street vacancies outnumber new shops by more than 2 to 1. As property economics and online giants reshape our town centres, what fills these empty spaces will define community life for decades. The future isn't retail, It is whatever we choose to build in its place. Share your thoughts below.